All right, unemployment. Now, just to give you an idea how bad it was, 1932 was obviously the worst time for unemployment in the Great Depression. The old joke is, in a recession, your neighbor loses his job. In a depression, you lose yours too. And that's kind of not very funny, but it just means that this is definitely something that we got to worry about if you're the president at the time. Now, if you take a look at the unemployment figures, there's a couple of things to notice. First off, the Depression, by most historians' accounts, is kind of between the years of 1929 to 1939. And when you have that, what would you tend to say? Would you say from 1929 to 1939 that the Depression is getting better or worse? It's better if the unemployment rate's going down. Question, is it going down from 29 to 39? Well, it's kind of like yes and no, right? Do you notice how in 1937, and this is big because I'm going to come back to it, do you notice how in 1937 the unemployment rate goes up again? Okay? Now notice the unemployment rate goes down significantly once 1939 hits. Does anyone know why that is? World War II. What specifically about World War II? Pearl Harbor's not yet. That's 41.
Production.
The wartime production, right? And so you got to produce all the ships and the bombs and the planes and the tanks and everything else. Rosie the Riveter, all that stuff. By 1942, 43, America's economy is booming. And so when I talk about the New Deal does not solve the Great Depression. I don't care how much anybody says that it does. It makes it a little bit better. Because during the years Roosevelt is president in the Depression, you can clearly see from the record that those programs that are designed to put people to work actually do work to some degree, but they don't get us totally 100% out of the Depression. There is no government program that can ever do that, or series of programs, but that's what Roosevelt's going to try to do. And that's what the New Deal is. The New Deal was something that President Roosevelt promised to Americans right when he got elected. And he's promised this thing called a New Deal, and no one knew what the heck he was talking about. In fact, frankly, he didn't even know what he was talking about. President Roosevelt was a smart man, don't get me wrong, one of the elites of society, but yet, when it came to economics, he relied on a very strong group of intellectuals called his brain trust, who were like academic people that worked in like pretty prestigious universities and stuff, and even people that worked inside his cabinet. And they were the ones that kind of came up with the ideas to try to increase employment. And that's what the New Deal is all about. And of course, this is the president that's going to try to get us out of the Great Depression. As you know the great quote, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Yes, that's exactly it. But Roosevelt, again, was willing to pretty much try, I'm going to go out on a limb here, nearly anything to put people back to work. Nearly anything. If it meant putting people out in the middle of like nowhere to build a road, if it meant improving like the Golden Gate Bridge or building the Hoover Dam where Megatron still is, some Transformers. If it means like, whatever it is, build it, put people to work, use the government to do that. And that's what Roosevelt did, basically, with the New Deal. And the way that he did that, he went on, like, for his time, was kind of a media campaign. Nowadays, presidents get in front of the cameras and talk, or get in front of the YouTube and post. You didn't know this, but Barack Obama has a YouTube account. You can watch him if you guys are really bored. Anyways, basically what he did is, very famously, they had these things called the fireside chats. And the reason they were called the fireside chats is because most American families had a radio right in the center of their home, next to the fireplace. That was like the family meeting place, and so people would gather around. And it was a big deal back in the day to gather around and listen to President Roosevelt talk about the New Deal programs. This is so significant because this changes the way presidents do things. After Roosevelt, the president and the media have to need each other. When you look at the previous presidents like Harding and Coolidge, and guys that didn't like to talk to the media about election, guys that didn't try to get create like a public persona and stuff, Roosevelt is the complete opposite, which is why people loved him, which is probably the reason why he was elected for 4 straight times. Okay? And so just creating that idea of public opinion behind your policies by getting on the radio at dinner times, when people could listen, it was a big deal. Even in World War II, what he would do is he would ask little kids and try to involve them. It's kind of like a family. He tried to involve little kids in tracing where the battles were going to be over in Asia and over in Europe, and asked kids to follow along with like a crayon or a pencil to diagram out where the war is going to go. So he was really good at talking to people and getting people involved and making them feel like, hey, we're all in this together and that we can beat this depression, we can beat this. So what are some of the things he did? Well, one of the very first things that he did 2 days after taking office is he declared what was called a bank holiday. What this meant is that the banks, in the Great Depression, there were hundreds of banks that failed throughout the United States. And when a bank failed and went out of business, if you had savings accounts in those banks of any kind, checking accounts, savings accounts, whatever it might be, you would have lost 100% of your money. In the video, I was going to tell you, there was this guy, a janitor in New York City by the name of George Gallius. Let me tell you his story. This is crazy. And this is just how sad the Depression was. Okay, so this dude saved 40 years. Okay, janitor in New York City, 40 years, taking money out of his paycheck, putting it into the Bank of the United States. 40 years. 40 years. The Great Depression hits. He goes to take his money out because he's retired now. And guess what? The bank has closed because the bank has lost the money because people have lost their jobs. They can't pay back the mortgages owed to the bank for their homes. So the bank fails. George Gallius goes home later that night and he hangs himself in his own home. It took him 40 years to save $1,000. That's what bank failures did to people. 40 years. So, and he was not alone. There were other stories, and you could probably Google them and find like a ton of stories about people that had that same thing happen. And so one of the things that Roosevelt did is he recognized that banks are important, because having a bank that's open, that you can draw from, is absolutely huge to the confidence of the economy. And so he closed the banks so that they couldn't go out of business, and then took government money that the Treasury had and injected it into the banking system. And when he did that, and opened the banks shortly after that, quickly, overnight almost, people started depositing more than they were taking out, because they knew that there was a reserve of cash if their bank was to go out of business, and the bank and the government was basically going to bail them out. That is absolutely huge, and it's an important thing to understand, because you see, with us in our day and age, because of the Great Depression and the New Deal, we have what's called the 1933 FDIC. It's the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, to make sure that our banks are safe. If any bank that you guys bank with is going to be fully 100% insured if your bank goes out of business. If your bank goes out of business tomorrow, you can rest assured that if your bank is affiliated with that policy right there, which it has to be by law, okay, even if it's a credit union, you know that your money will be safe and you will get paid back every single penny that is in that bank. That is absolutely huge, because without that guarantee, people wouldn't invest in banks, and then banks couldn't lend money, and then, you follow me? You need to have stability in the banking system. Roosevelt, that's the very first thing he did. And that was on like the second day he was actually president. Usually presidents take office like the third week of January. Like right then, boom. And Roosevelt's first 100 days were full of other attempts to try to maintain some stability in the economy. Now, did this eliminate the Depression? No. But it just took a little slice, like a big giant pizza, little slice, little one day at a time. Okay, that's too elementary for you. The New Deal was often joked around with and called alphabet soup. I always enjoyed eating Chef Boyardee as a kid. It was kind of ghetto, but it was cool. Okay, never mind. This is a funny cartoon, maybe not kind of funny, but whatever, of Roosevelt's dabbling with different acronyms during the New Deal. You had all these different 3-letter acronyms for different things that were different policies and stuff. And one of them, let's go over a few of them. And I'm not going in any particular order at this point in terms of chronology. I'm trying to give you guys some of the main ones that I think are important for you to know. One of them was called the National Recovery Administration, or the NRA. Not the same as the gun, NRA, of course, don't be confused. But typifying the New Deal, every agency had to have like 3 or 4 letters. And that's maybe what the cartoonist is kind of making fun of. The NRA was important because this was the very first time in American history that the U.S. government, federal government, stepped in to provide fair labor codes. I'll talk about that in a second. To provide things that we take for granted today, such as a minimum wage, to a federal end to child labor so that kids would not be oppressed anymore. Also, guaranteed shortened work hours with overtime. If you work at an 8-to-5 job or a minimum wage job, you can thank this policy, because the very first minimum wage was 25 cents an hour. The next year that it was going so well, they raised it to 35 cents an hour. Yeah, okay. My first job as a college student, one of my first jobs, I worked at Fresno Pacific University doing janitorial work. I cleaned bathrooms. Great time. I got to be by myself. I got to listen to my Walkman back in the day, 1995, 97. It was pretty dope. I got to like just do a lot of stuff. Got $4.25 an hour. I was doing such a great job midway through the summer. My supervisor said, "John, guess what, buddy? $4.35 for you." Yes. Nowadays, we're talking about $15 an hour. Like the city of Seattle is at $15 an hour.
Oakland just raised theirs.
Oakland, where did they get it to?
It's like 12.15.
12.15. Yeah.
San Francisco might be raising it as well.
San Francisco's probably going to do it too. So buy your stuff outside of San Francisco. Bring your own plastic bag. No, okay. But establishing something that's fair and something that works for all. It was a tremendous aspect of